Well, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those Pacific Coast, and welcome to our webcast, Business Intelligence for Corporate Finance, How BI Can Improve Finance and Operations, a webcast and panel discussion sponsored by the Controllers Council. My name is Neil Brown. I'm Executive Director of the Controllers Council. And today, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Amir Bednarsh, Corporate Controller at Kayco, the largest kosher foods distributor in the United States. Jory Weissman, VP of Sales and Chief Software Architect for MyBar and the Business Software Education Center. And finally, Derek Nakamo, Power Platform Practice Manager for MyBar. Welcome, gentlemen, and welcome again to all of our attendees. So my role today is to introduce, to allow Jory to go ahead and introduce the agenda. Jory?
Thanks so much, Neil, and thanks for having us. We're thrilled to be here and excited to make this presentation today. Today, we're going to be focusing on several things, specifically around business intelligence and the impact it has on financial professionals. Specifically, we'll be looking at industry trends and digital transformation initiatives that are really the underpinning of what's happening with respect to IT in this particular topic. We'll be focused on Power BI and Microsoft solution that delivers business intelligence, and we'll be focusing on the impact of corporate finance professionals. Part of that, we'll be taking a look at Microsoft Power BI, an overview where it fits in within the Microsoft ecosystem. And then we're going to be speaking with Amir Bednarsh, as Neil mentioned. He's the corporate controller at Kayco. We're going to learn a bit about Amir's journey through Power BI and also his early steps and his desire to achieve significant business intelligence initiatives at his organization. Then we'll spend a little bit of time with our associate Derek, who will be showing some visualizations of various BI solutions that I think might resonate and get involved in a little bit of an interactive demo. And then we'll take some questions and answers from the audience, making sure we give you feedback, and having your voice heard is an important part of today's agenda. And then finally, Neil will circle back, so please do hang in there about some important Controllers Council business and some important save the dates. So as we think about today's session, I found this particular quote a couple of months back, and I thought it was apropos to today's session, specifically from Satya Nadella, suggesting that really every organization has to start thinking about themselves a little bit differently, thinking themselves not just as a consumer of software, but organizations that leverage technology to a strategic advantage. It's more about thinking about yourself and your own digital future. And while Mr. Nadella's perspective might be somewhat skewed, we thought it would be important, and we undertook a survey, we commissioned a survey as part of the Business Software Education Center to get a sense of what your industry peers were thinking. And so what we did is we looked at about 1,000 businesses coast to coast. The demographics you see displayed here, about 50% of the organizations, sub 500 employees, classically defined as small and mid-market organizations, and the balance larger, what we'll call emerging enterprise organizations, to get their perspective. And these were more corporate executives responding to the survey, and we asked them, do they plan to implement or continue to implement any digital transformation in 2021? And resoundingly, the response was yes. Approximately 2/3 of the respondents had indicated that they plan to undertake some form of digital transformation. So digging into those numbers a bit further, we wanted to look and say, well, really, it's a broad topic. What does that mean? And so nearly 1/3 of the respondents indicated that analytics, dashboards, and advanced reporting was of prime importance to them. Certainly no surprise looking at today's attendance and interest in our program. But beyond advanced analytics and dashboard reporting, digital transformation was cited, artificial intelligence was cited, all things that are really part of a comprehensive cloud strategy. And we're going to talk today with Amir and Derek about how those technologies can be leveraged within a BI framework to get an even greater result. Beyond that, we said, let's look at what the corporate finance professional is really concerned about as well. So similarly, the Controllers Council commissioned a survey called the Contemporary Controller Benchmark Study, and there were several key takeaways that were noted as part of the response group. Specifically, they had cited that nearly everyone is taking on more work, whether it's workforce reduction, a pivot towards remote work. 3 out of 4 corporate finance professionals had taken on additional roles and responsibilities. And most prevalent was addressing the need for workforce management. And Amir, that got me to thinking a little bit about your situation and obviously the realities of COVID, and knowing that you're what's termed an essential organization, being in the food service industry. I know that you and your staff really rolled up your sleeves and got to work business as usual, but you were not immune to the effects of COVID. And I know that you've always had a traditional remote workforce. I'm curious to find out, how has BI and the implementation of BI, how has that helped you close some of the gap, some of the new hires that you may have taken on during this period of time?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. As Jory said, I'm the controller at Kayco, and we're the largest kosher food distributor in the United States. We're based in New Jersey, but we actually have sub-distributors in Florida and California and Canada, in the Middle East, in Europe. So really, we are a global organization. And as you mentioned, because we're in the food industry, we're essential. So, when people ask you, have you started going back to your office? What's the plan? So I actually never left. We were open March, April last year, as the roads were empty. My commute was actually wonderful. That was probably the nicest part about this whole thing for me. But we were operating our warehouse, fully stacked over here. Our staff who works in, the accounting departments and the marketing departments, we sent home. We started bringing people back. So we were really all over the place, not just in various locations around the United States, but also half in the office, half out of the office, parts of people in the office, parts out. So for us, managing, what people could see, how they could work, was obviously a huge focus. And one of the things you mentioned there was, we actually have had a number of new hires as our business grew. And, I've been at this job now for about 5 years. We are at this point more than double where we were when I first started. And including in that time, at the end of 2019, we purchased Manischewitz and a bunch of new brands. So we're constantly hiring new people. And there are actually, I can think of at least 2 employees that we've hired in the last few months that I've never met. One works out of California. One is technically supposed to be in the office, but hasn't been able to make it in yet due to COVID and other concerns. And for us, having a simple and easy solution to learn about the company, to see the data, was paramount to us, succeeding and actually having, a banner year last year.
Interestingly enough, I know that they had to, try to, prior to having a good BI solution, getting access to some of that information. We'll talk about some of the trials and tribulations with that, but closing that gap in a remote workforce, I think from digital transformation in general, Power BI or a BI solution specifically can certainly help. And one of the boxes I have highlighted down here is business intelligence, FP&A, financial performance and analytics, and digital transformation did top the list. So again, Amir's not alone in that thought process, as are many of the attendees concerned about this. And that's a key thing as businesses look to move forward. As we look to the next slide, as we mentioned, about 73% of the respondents had cited increased responsibilities, which was not really a surprise. We looked at that in the last screen, but what I wanted to point out was the 2% here that cited decreased responsibilities, which just made me wonder a little bit how on earth that could be given today's day and age, but you never really know. But when we dive into some of the details of this particular study, we find that remote workforce management was on everybody's mind, right? 71% of the respondents, of the controllers that were surveyed, indicated that managing that type of remote workforce was really key. As of course, always present would be cost reduction initiatives and technology and software automation. So really a broad base of areas where you certainly can occupy a lot of your time, and the demands are great. But specifically, we wanted to drill into the FP&A area of discussion, again, as it makes sense and relevant to today's presentation. And we look at primary roles of the controller. Nearly 70% of the respondents had indicated that reporting and FP&A was part of their primary role and responsibility. And the CFO did in fact cite financial planning and analytics. However, we know that the controllers are the ones that are probably amassing and feeding that information. So it really puts a tremendous strain. So it's incumbent on us to find the best and most efficient ways to make use of this technology. And it's no easy task. You know, if we harken back to that earlier slide where organizations are thinking of themselves as more of software and technology companies than they are in their traditional roles, we see the emergence of these additional silos, very powerful tools enabled by the cloud. But you think about CRM and warehouse management applications and finance and ERP systems, it's certainly no easy task for a modern controller who really needs to be, you know, one part financial analyst and one part IT director and one part operations control point. It's certainly tying these things together and creating a 360-degree view of the organization is definitely no easy task. But I want to call attention to one specific area here that is also emerging significantly and how BI systems can play a role, and that is the emergence of a portal and the concept of a portal. And I know that now as we've got some of the basics underway in Amir, and actually beyond basic for sure, but we've taken some steps in foray into the area of portal development. So Amir, perhaps you can share with the audience how you're leveraging your business intelligence platform to bring together other members of your supply chain that are not necessarily part of your traditional business.
Sure. This is actually something that we have in place now, and we're actually looking to expand to save additional time and energy. Essentially, last year we actually started a new JV, a joint venture, with one of our suppliers for key strategic purposes. And part of that is they wanted the ability to see sales and data in real time. Initially, that started out as us sending them reports. Every time they had a question, we had to respond back. We had to put something together for them. Eventually, as we built out Power BI, we decided to create a login for them, which alleviated the need for them to essentially ever come to us with just general data questions. And it actually elevated the conversation from, you know, can you tell us what happens, to let them spend the time looking at it, and then they come back to us with better questions, better analysis. You know, why did something happen, instead of, you know, explaining to them what happened.
That's a great paradigm shift, and certainly I'm sure that's happening with your management staff and other staff members as well, and the concept of self-service as opposed to, you know, demanding and as you said, you know, taking the time to put together the reports. So appreciate that insight for sure.
Yeah, on a monthly basis, actually, I have about a dozen reports that I have to send out in the first 10 days of the month.
Right.
And next on my to-do list is shifting the burden from myself to Power BI. So get ready for that.
Great. And we'll talk with Derek about how the platform can facilitate that, and the concept of social and sharing is obviously key. But, you know, we all know that this is a bit of a journey to get there, and you know, thinking about, you know, where we started and what was the push, and I'm sure this story would resonate with most in attendance today, specifically around at inception, whether you have a bookkeeping or an ERP or, you know, some kind of business process automation solution. Most of the sales analysis that was derived out of those systems, and still many of them are in use today, and consumers are depending upon this to, you know, customize or create custom reporting as the demands of the organization had grown. We know that it's very expensive. We know that it's time consuming and somewhat inflexible. While it's important to have fundamental ERP reports that are control documents and other mechanisms, trying to morph those into the ad hoc style queries can often be challenging and time consuming. So that kind of sent us looking for what's next. And there were a lot of missteps along the way, and we're going to cover some of them. And beyond ERP enhancement, not to be left out of the discussion topic, because we are talking about financially focused reporting tools as well as analytic tools in general, very common to bolt-on solutions like F9 or FRX. The problem with some of those that were tied on to ERP solutions is that they were singular in purpose. They were often married to the ERP. They were challenging to customize. They were not available for the consumers in the manner that Amir was just chatting about. So while it did give some flexibility in producing nice financial reports, it really didn't go far enough as a comprehensive solution for the organization. And so, people set out and say, well, there's the old standard, right? Let's go to Excel. And of course, a lot of organizations are exporting data, whether you're using QuickBooks or you're using, some mid-market ERP solutions that are out there, and exporting information for additional analysis into Excel. Or Amir, I know you and I made a pit stop where we connected Excel to the SQL Server database to do some live reads. And as most in attendance today may be comfortable with developing pivot tables, you were somewhat Excel savvy. But with millions of detail lines and tons of data, it was really becoming difficult to scale. But other things that we find are a problem with it is that it's error prone and subject to user variances, as well as at some level insecure, because you have 6 or 8 different versions of the truth on a singular report, circulating throughout your email system, and so the variance potential is significant there. I don't know if you can shed any additional light on some of the challenges, or if you can echo some of those thoughts, but I know it was challenging to rely solely on Excel.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, and this is the issue we have with the ERP in general, aside from, you mentioned it's time consuming, it's complicated, it's also, it's not mobile, right? In 2021, we're not looking to add any type of technology, particularly one that's helping with, data and analysis and, business intelligence in general, that can't be done remotely. It can't be done on a laptop or on a phone, right? You mentioned we have a remote workforce here, right? We have people in a warehouse, we have people in an office, and we have salesmen on the road. None of those guys are, sitting in a store, opening up a laptop, asking them for the password and trying to connect so they can run a report, right? In this day and age, everybody needs it on the go, ready, easy to find information. Even if they had the laptop, if they have this, spreadsheet, as you mentioned, which had hundreds of thousands or millions of lines, right? You put in one filter and you sit there, you ask them for 3 minutes if they can wait while, the report's working, or else it's going to crap out on them.
Right.
So that wasn't really a solution that worked for us.
Absolutely. And while it gave us a little flexibility, it quickly proved to be ineffective. So the journey continues. And very often organizations turn to Microsoft SQL Server reporting services. It's a web-based tool that facilitates reporting, certainly can support the scale, certainly has the capabilities, and really nice when embedding that within web applications or portals. But again, it is a highly technical framework, somewhat difficult to modify, and does not provide the form of agility and mobility that Amir is talking about. While it does have a place, it is usually reserved for those with a little bit more of a technical capability and more of the developer type, as opposed to the layperson. Even something like adding filters or pivoting on some data could be certainly very challenging for a layperson. So we really didn't spend a lot of time there. And of course, there's the old standby of having, a comprehensive data warehouse. And when you're talking about scale and you're talking about an organization like Kayco being able to support millions and millions of rows of data to analyze information, the data warehouse certainly might be a logical choice, but proves to be very, very costly, both either in infrastructure or cloud services to maintain that, and of course, significant infrastructure and consulting services that are required to make a data warehouse. And I should highlight in bold costly, because some of them can be quite expensive. So we landed on Power BI. And at first look, several years ago, it was met with a bit of a tepid response. I know that, but we kind of persevered through. We're now what we affectionately call PBI 2.0 at your organization. But even before there was a 1.0, it was challenging to get the user adoption. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. But BI does deliver on the vision of being scalable, low cost, agile, mobile, and very easy to use, so that even your average user is going to be able to interact with the software in ways you never thought possible when thinking about things like crystal reports or other more complex reporting tools. Amir, perhaps you can shed a little bit of insight in terms of your users, and we'll get into training and how they've adapted, but just in terms of the use case, what your experience has been like in the real world.
Sure. Well, let me actually take a step back to pre-Power BI days when I first started, just as a story to kind of explain where we came from and where we went. At the end of the year, we run a 7-week sales program. It's a little bit of a slower time, and we have about 20 guys working on this program. The first couple of years, guys went all out. They're trying to raise sales. They're trying to sell new items. When they wanted to know how they were doing, what they did is they'd call the office. They'd ask them to run reports. I would get constant emails. We were supposed to send out updates once a week with how everyone was doing, where everything was progressing. Until they got my email on Monday morning, they had no idea where they were in the program. They didn't know, how much their sales had gone up. They didn't know which customers they were up, what brands they were up, what items they were up. They didn't have that in the palm of their hands. And it went from them emailing me to where am I? Am I going to reach 6%? Am I going to reach 8%? To the point where now that they have Power BI, I don't get any of these questions. This is all on them at this point. They have everything they need. They know, by item, it's easily sliceable. It's easy to analyze. I would compare it almost to the difference between, like a kid in a class versus, when parents come for parent teachers. Yeah. Right. The kid knows how he's doing in history, right? When he gets a 75 at the end of the year, or he gets 100, he sees the quizzes, he sees the tests, he understands the coursework. Parents go in, twice a year. How did I not know this was happening? Nobody told me. Nobody informed me. We essentially went from that kind of relationship with data to, someone who's all in on the data, understands where everything's coming from, isn't surprised. By the end of the year, by the end of the quarter, they know exactly where they're gaining, they know exactly where they're getting, and it's simple and easy. So, to us, it's completely changed the nature of, the relationship everyone has here with data.
And I think the immersive nature, and Derek's going to speak to that a little bit when we go through the presentation portion of this, the immersive nature of going on a data journey, being able to ask questions and drill through, and not just seeing, hey, on a static piece of output, how am I performing? And that might be nice, to scroll down the page and look for where you're at, but to be able to drill in, as you say, with multiple dimensions and slicing, with having near instantaneous response with high volumes at a significantly lower cost of ownership, really becomes a very compelling and powerful combination. So what makes this possible is and we're focusing on Microsoft Power BI. That's where we have the greatest level of familiarity, and I think there's a lot of good reasons why. But there are other solutions that are out there in the marketplace. But the advantage here is that this sits within the entire Microsoft ecosystem, specifically the Office 365 ecosystem, and it's tied together with other solutions. And Derek, I know one of the key things about adoption is making it usable, not just as a standalone application, but certainly as it becomes part of a more holistic solution. Specifically, I'm thinking around CRM. So maybe you can share with the audience today a little bit about how the solutions work together and the interoperability I'm referring to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jory. So, I mean, you brought up CRM, but just thinking about the whole platform as a whole, right? Even the idea or the psychological hurdle of signing in and signing out of different applications, right? So Power BI being part of the Microsoft suite, if you're signing into Exchange for your email, it's going to be the same login. So basically, you have the single identity that's going to give you access to everything, and now that is inclusive of Power BI. in terms of interoperability between other applications, so we've been working on the Dynamics 365 platform for years, and while it's a fantastic application, one of the pain points that people usually called out were the lack of depth of the dashboards. So introduce Power BI and the connection with the Dynamics 365 database. It enables us to have those rich visualizations embedded directly into Dynamics with a live data feed. So it's basically retired the dashboards that people didn't like, and Power BI has just taken over an entire element of that application. And what's nice, again, with the single sign-on, the user is blind to that. They think they're in Dynamics CRM, they just signed in, and they're just seeing prettier pictures. So, I think that's just one of many use cases that we can highlight.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, there's the cost factor, right? So part of the Office 365 suite, it's certainly very, very attractive there. So the average user price is really minimal, correct?
That's right. It's $10 per user per month.
Interesting. And it's a perfect adjunct to the email platform. And of course, there are other solutions that can be built upon this to embed it in e-commerce applications or other applications. So there's a multitude of use cases, but the interoperability is the key. And that's why we think that the Microsoft platform certainly is going to be a winner in this category. But we want to focus on Power BI for the corporate controller beyond some basics of sales analytics. And when we think about this, certainly what first comes to mind is the concept of budget and forecasting, and having the ability to incorporate these various elements without necessarily expanding on the chart of accounts, right? So traditionally a GL segment or a GL chart of account structure would help to drive budgets. But because this is an aggregator of data from multiple systems, it gives us the capability to budget to many different things. So Derek, Amir, and Derek, I guess you can kick it off. When it comes to budgeting and being able to incorporate budget data, we're not reliant exclusively on ERP for budget data, but we can use other sources of this information, correct?
Yep, that's absolutely correct. So I think that highlights one of the parts of every Power BI project that really makes the application or platform shine is the combination of the structured data that you'll have, whether it's in CRM or ERP. So you'll have structured sales data that's very clean. And then there's the ad hoc data that isn't systematized. And the ability to take those two different data sources, in this scenario, you might have sales data from ERP, but budget data might not be in ERP, but it's in a CFO's Excel spreadsheet, right? So what we do is we basically take the data in Excel, the data in ERP, we create a data model within BI, and that allows us to compare your structured sales data with your ad hoc budget data to the end user who's consuming that, right? Again, it's invisible to them. They're blind to that. So it certainly highlights probably one of the most powerful elements of Power BI, which is the ability to take data from various data sources and bring it together and create this narrative. So no longer are people dissuaded from trying to budget and forecast because they don't know how to get it into their ERP, or it's too cumbersome in ERP. So right. Yeah.
Very, very key. And traditional financial budgets that are housed within ERP, fantastic. But I know Amir is budgeting to, they may be looking at brand budgets or channel budgets or goals and goal attainment and managing those through this type of model is important. But along with this sensitive information and making it available, obviously there are concerns about data security and having the ability to manage that so that we can control what the users see. We're going to spend a few minutes on the next slide talking about what we call the DNA of a successful Power BI project or business intelligence project, but certainly making sure that the data is secure. Unlike sitting in Excel or PDF documents, we can control the export capabilities. You certainly can export if you want to allow the users to do that, but you can control the movement of this information, how this information gets circulated, and who is seeing what. So in your position, knowing that these things are accounted for in the data model and in the security model obviously creates some peace of mind. The ability for ad hoc personalization, right? So we call it this the low code or no code environment. That's not to suggest that the startup of a BI solution does not require the development of some strategic visualizations, but if done the right way, giving users the capability to filter and slice and dynamically go on that data journey independently. And this isn't just, the sales literature. I think this has really exhibited itself in a practical reality that I believe Amir enjoys each day. And perhaps, Amir, you can talk to that a little bit about your ability, and perhaps Derek can chime in there about how you guys are able to very quickly change the face of BI without a lengthy process involved.
Sure. So, initially we started a couple of years ago with our key sales report, which was, sales report 1.0. At this point, we've created a bunch of additional reports, which I can speak to at a different point. But we are now on sales report 2.0. And one of the big changes we had on this was in the first version, we have two main data boxes on the screen. And what we did was we essentially created 7 or 8 different tabs, each one showing, different sets of data. So, the first one might be customer and item. The next one might have been brand and item. The next one might have been sales channel and salesperson, et cetera. And what we decided to do was replace all that with personalization features. So, I'm sure most people here are probably pretty familiar with Excel. And it looks a lot more like a pivot table where the user can not just change and decide what data goes in there, but also has the ability to build hierarchy of the data if they want. So the top of the screen, they can have, sales channel. And then if you click in, you get sales customer. At the bottom, you can have item. And the nice part is, and, as Derek will show in a little bit, right, everything is not just customizable, but everything is specific to what you choose. So when you're focusing in on, a certain brand or a certain item, it's going to only show data that's highlighted for that brand. And the ability to constantly and simply change what data you're seeing really helps you, come to a solution in terms of, where you're succeeding, where you're failing, how you can do better. And it kind of just allows you to forge your own path in BI.
Essentially create.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Derek. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, what really, what Amir is harping on is really the importance of, constructing a solid foundation, a good data model, right? Because with a good data model, that's what allows all of these data elements to be dragged and dropped and work and function effectively universally, right? So when Amir is looking at his sales data, right, and we have a data element from an item like brand that he drags into effectively his pivot table, and the same way that somebody could do the exact same analysis could bring a sales rep, which comes from a different table, and the fact that it will behave and perform the same way is really a testament to the planning and the foundation of a solid data model. And sorry, I just wanted to harp on one thing with respect to security, right? So you focused on exporting, which is super important, but also part of the data model is security and the idea of role level security, right? Which means that we have a one-stop shop, right? But depending on who you are and what context you are, what role you're assigned, right? I sign in as a manager and I get to see the people that I manage, right? You sign in, Jory, as the CFO, or Amir as the CFO, and we'll see everything. It's the same back-end process, it's the same data, right? Except it just knows to model that out when I sign in, and it makes the maintenance of that a whole lot easier than having to worry about creating separate reports and separate versions for different people. So
that's great. So we can create one multi-purpose kind of report that gives the user the agility to customize that experience, knowing that security is really going to handle. And I don't want to get too far ahead with some of that in terms of our process modeling, which we'll get to in a moment, but there's really solid insights, guys, so thank you. Of course, being able to use this beyond budgeting and forecasting into the corporate performance reporting arena. I know one of the things that we're doing for Amir is being able to assemble a board package, a really comprehensive set of analytics that I think is saving a ton of time. Makes a beautiful presentation package that's delivered on a timely basis without much labor So Amir, I don't know if you can add anything to what I just said on that topic, but I believe that's been a huge time saver for you and really delivers sophisticated financial analysis for you.
Sure. When we started, as I mentioned, we only started with the basic sales report, and we had someone who worked for us. Her name was Sophia, and she decided she was retiring. She spent a day to 2 days every month, the first day or two of the month, putting together this comprehensive monthly report, which was, the DNA of our company. It went to owners, the board. If this report, fell into the wrong hands, it would essentially give someone everything about our company. It's about 50 pages long. What we decided to do was, instead of finding someone else to put this report together and spend a day or two on, we spoke to Derek. We decided to move it to Power BI. And now, instead of someone working on this for a couple of days at the beginning of the month, I sign on, and as I did literally just yesterday, Monday morning at 8 a.m., I go to Power BI. The report was already done, already completed. I put in zero effort once we initially planned it, and every year we update it. And that goes back to also your budgeting and forecasting square you have on the top left. Part of that also includes forecasts, which we've given to Derek at the beginning of the year, where he's pulling our actual sales data from our ERP. He's pulling our forecasts, on the back end from a spreadsheet, and mirroring these two together. And it's literally zero effort on my end.
So maybe you're in that 2%, Amir. I don't know. Could be.
Yeah, my whole day is just doing my bar.
That's wonderful to hear. But and then, of course, certified data sets, ensuring that there is consistency. And again, as much as important as security is, ensuring that we all have the same version of the truth. We'll talk about that in a few more minutes. But knowing that you can have a certified data set that's defining what is revenue, right? What is that revenue calculation, and then using that certified data set repeatedly. Unlike Excel or other ad hoc reporting tools, once you've created your model with those certified sets, then we can deliver that data on demand, and it's a very important consideration. And then, of course, there's the leveraging of the cloud and digital transformation as a whole, because the analytics really transcend just corporate performance reporting and how are we doing, but how are we doing as compared to other things, other assets. There's a use case that we got involved with an organization who is responsible for managing retail sales at various institutions throughout the country. They actually staff the retail establishments. And so one of the things that they wanted to look at was the correlation between staffing requirements and weather, right? How much staff, looking at sales, looking at staffing, and looking at weather, and then being able to incorporate services through data feeds that's available on the Azure cloud platform, part of Microsoft, or others that are being published, to incorporate that data into our model, which is pretty exciting. As it relates to Kayco in particular, being a kosher food organization, when they compare year over year sales, they really just can't look at how am I doing this March and April versus last March and April, when they're thinking about holidays that may be ascribed to the Jewish or Hebrew calendar. Those holidays fall on different dates, so it became extremely challenging for them to get a holistic view of comparative sales analytics. So Derek, maybe you can talk through how we're using some of the web resources and some creativity to solve this particular problem, to highlight what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this basically just highlights another element of BI, which is it allows us to do things that previously just weren't feasible to us, right? And the elegance and ease with which we can do it, right? So the Hebrew calendar is a perfect example where we are now consuming through web data that we're scraping basically the next 30 years of every Jewish holiday. So we've modeled out effectively a calendar that will correlate each year's holiday with a date on the Gregorian calendar. So take Passover, which could be in April 15th last year, but March 2nd this year. And we've modeled it such that we can view things in terms of days before Passover. So if the Kayco team can now look at 60 days before Passover this year, to 60 days before Passover last year. And that's just, a great example of not only leveraging external data sources, but just using a flexible platform that allows us to be creative and just do things that, we would have never really even thought about tackling.
Yeah, I think that weather scenario certainly is one, but it really does open up significant vistas and can rely on things outside of the confines of the data you may have available. So we thought it was important to talk about the DNA of a successful BI project and what are the important elements through our insights that we think as you consider and weigh your own options, things to really focus on. And I think Amir alluded to the concept of not just necessarily building one report, and that may be where you need to start because it's the one touch point that most people have is, hey, let's replace this with something that gives us some of the dynamics we're talking about. But really, if you want to undertake it to have some scale and to have some longevity and not reinvest in work over time, building out a proper data model, that is thinking about and defining the relationships of the various entities, both for the immediate need and for the future, right? So thinking not just about customers and items, but thinking about other avenues, whether it's channels or representatives or management structure or supervisory structures that are necessary. Define the particular data points and entity relationships, as well as then defining the specific measures, developing a group of standardized roll-up values that may be something like a year-to-date gross profit or a month-to-date gross profit calculation or year-to-date, month-to-date revenue. Having repeatable, reusable snippets, what we'll call measures, that can be incorporated into different visualizations will help to drive lower cost development and create the ad hoc iterations that Amir and Derek were both talking about. Secondary point I wanted to bring up is defining a security model. Defining, as Derek alluded to, row-level security that can be applied throughout the BI framework. Think about that matrix of the user and what data you want them to have access to and how you want them to have access to that information. And then using the capabilities that are inherent in the platform to be able to restrict and curtain the record view, as Derek called, row level and user level security, so that while we may want to allow user to have access to a particular entity, maybe there are records within that entity we don't want them to have access to, or it's not pertinent to their world, and we don't want to muddy the water with that. The next point we'll raise here is having some ERP awareness, right? What is your back-end system, right? Where's the core of the data stored, and having some knowledge about how that solution works, the data files where you can source that information from, and when they're updated and how they're built, and understanding your business process in the context of ERP. So having familiarity with the data structure, when things happen within an organization, really supports timing and supports an effective rollout of a BI solution. And the last area for a successful project I wanted to focus on is developing champions. Now, Amir, I think you did an excellent job. You were clearly the lead of the organization, really taking this under your wing. But I know that you did a couple of strategic things up front, which I think would be universal to everybody in attendance today, about how you championed the solution and got your constituents on board. Maybe you can share a bit about that with us now.
So this started initially with a conversation, with Derek and yourself and me in the room. And when we decided to start planning this and move forward, I identified a few, power users in terms of, who knows the data, who knows how to build these things, who's key at providing feedback. And, I found, at least in every organization I've been at, everybody probably knows who those people are beforehand. We built something together. We rolled it out to a few key managers. At that point, we took their feedback. We went back a little bit. I gave it to 3 salespeople at the time. Once we felt comfortable, we had a big rollout. It was really nice. You did everything to the nines. You want to get everybody on board. And at that point, we kind of sat back and told everyone, listen, we're happy to change. We're happy to make adjustments, to give you what you need, right? This is a tool for you. We gave them about 3 months where we collected all the feedback we could, and we came back slowly over time, and they got to see it with their own eyes, which is something that we found very helpful, where I got to tell someone, hey, remember that conversation we had from last week, just letting you know this is being incorporated in the next version. So I would say just be strategic with how you're doing it. Take it slow. Start with a key group, and then eventually move on and take feedback as you start to grow and sort of make the net a little wider.
Understood. I think that's really positive insight, because a project like this needs momentum, needs user adoption, or it'll tend to die on the vine, so to speak. So we're going to quickly, with the remaining 15 minutes we have left for the presentation, is just going to jump into some visualizations and turn certain things over to Derek, and we do want to leave some time for Q&A. So I'm just going to give you a look-see at some of the visualizations we've got created. And so one of the things I wanted to point out in this particular visualization, and these are the slicers here at the top of the screen that we're talking about, being able to go through, and Derek's going to show you a live example of this immersive experience in a few minutes, but how you have some interactivity between these particular components. But if you'll notice here, this is one that's inventory centric, right? Focusing on inventory turnover and turns and inventory valuation. A secondary view might be one that's geographic and focusing on orders and numbers of customers and giving you a drill down capability, both bidirectionally. So clicking on a region of the map and seeing results, or clicking here and getting the map results and recasting the data it's being presented to you. And then an example of the platform itself relative to mobility and how you can produce income statements and real rich financial statements, comparative financial statements, and then deliver this content in a mobile and compelling way. And then having another example of a solution such as a traditional sales analysis visualization, where we're going to focus in. And I'm going to launch into here, just turning over control to Derek for a moment to give him a couple of minutes to expand on this particular visualization.
Yep. So I think that you should all be able to see my screen right now.
Actually, we're seeing the splash page, so we're not seeing your screen just yet. You have to.
Okay. How about now?
There you go. Now we got it. Good job.
All right. So thank you, Jory. So I mean, basically what we wanted to do is just give you insight into what a real Power BI report looked like and what we mean by this interactivity. So this is a traditional sales report. It shows sales by customer that have been redacted, sales over time by some slicer like industry, some profit data. But what we really want to highlight is the interactivity and highlight the role of the data model here, right? So up top, if I were to go to one of my slicers and then say, okay, I just want to see data in XYZ location, right? I could slice by location and I pick New York. What you're going to see is the entire report right now. Again, it's a centralized experience. So I've come in, I'm looking at a year's worth of data just at New York, and now I want to look at a specific industry, right? So I come in and say I want to see IT, right? So now my entire report page is going to be responsive, and then if I wanted to home in on a certain customer, right? So I want to see how the revenue by this customer, the $590,000, looks over the course of a year. So then I can come in here and then highlight a customer, and again, you'll see that the entire report page will become dynamic. So really what we're trying to highlight is that Power BI is not like the traditional, you click, you run a report, you look at it, and then you do it all over again. It's really meant to be a starting point that you dive in and drill and drill and drill. And this is just a simple example of it, one that we could make that would be pretty relevant to basically everybody. But I thought this was a good way to demonstrate really what Power BI is and what it means. So
excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Derek. Appreciate that. And as we focus back, and hopefully everybody's seeing my screen again, we wanted to get into a bit of the Q&A. So I'll just light up our webcams here and see if we can get Amir and myself up on the screen along with Derek.
Yep. So there actually was one point that I wanted to highlight about, I saw some of the questions come across, specifically about what it meant to be, a data warehouse. So, what Jory was talking about in that path, that journey, right, was, traditional data warehousing, right, expensive ETL processing. So I think the question was, I was surprised to hear that Kayco doesn't have a data warehouse. So Power BI is not going to be a live feed from the database, right? We wouldn't want to do that, right? So what Power BI's technology brings to the table is really the tool called Power Query. And what Power Query is a way to effectively extract data and then store it in the Azure cloud. Again, that's going to be invisible to the end user, right? They're not going to see that data, right? But basically, you're going to pull that data into the Azure cloud, and that's where the reporting is going to be executed off of. So there was another question that was related with respect to the data lake, right? Azure Data Lake. And what we've done for Kayco, and really it's our a best practice, is we leverage technology in the Power BI platform called data flows, right? Which allow us to basically pull a unified set of data, store it in the Azure Data Lake, right? And then all subsequent reports that share data from those shared elements are going to take it from one place. So our refresh power is we've been able to reduce the impact on the SQL Server tenfold, right? We used to have different data sets and different data models for similar data in Kayco, right? Where we hit the SQL Server 6 times for similar data, and that is no longer. So.
And we're refreshing multiple times during the course of the day. So it's updated. I think you're getting 6 or 8 refreshes a day. So this is really fresh data, but it keeps the load off the system. So there's a couple of questions that the audience was kind enough to pose that I just wanted to share. And one of the key ones was asked, what was the learning curve like, Amir, for the rank and file? I know you talked about creating your champions, but let's talk about the end users. I know we've done some group training, but what was the learning curve like for your average user?
Yeah, so anytime you introduce new technology, you're always going to have some pushback there, and that's just people's personalities. I think we've all seen that. The nice part about BI is it's incredibly intuitive and simple. There are plenty of videos and online help desks that you can find for it, but honestly, you don't need it. I'm the expert here at Power BI, and I've looked at 0 of them. What's nice is that the data is only going in one direction. Right, it's coming from your ERP or wherever the source is back to Power BI. So there's nothing you can do in Power BI that can screw up the data. And that's a question I get all the time, which means that essentially do whatever you want in the system. Play around, click this, click that. With one button, it refreshes the whole page. So really just encourage people to look for solutions, play around with it, and just spend time on it. And that's it.
Interesting. And so what was some of the unexpected benefits that you were able to yield, and how has it improved in your role as a controller? How has it improved your job? I know you cited some time savings on the monthly board reports that are put together. Were there any other unexpected wins that you could cite that just happened that you didn't think about going in?
Yeah, something that comes to mind right away is we purchased Manischewitz in August 2019. Which means we now had a company that had millions of dollars of sales, hundreds of new items, 10 different brands, hundreds of new customers. And what we did was we put their historical data in our system, flagged as something different so it didn't mix with our data. And the salesman, who now all of a sudden had 400 new items on the road, could go to their Power BI screen, see their history with and without the old Manischewitz numbers, and it allowed them to see what a customer did on brands they've never sold. And it allowed them to view themselves, right? When someone has, tons of new sales, it's not impressive to be up, 40% or 80%, right? What was nice about it was they were able to see compared to how they did before we owned the brand and how they did after the brand. And without a salesman having the history, I don't know how we would have succeeded with it.
Understood. Well, boy, this was great. So Neil, we're up against the last 5 minutes, and I know you have some housekeeping, and the hour certainly flew by from our perspective, and hopefully your counsel found that the information was compelling and relevant. So I'd like to turn this back over to you, sir, to conclude. I know you have some parting thoughts and comments, but before I do, certainly just want to make mention of the fact that if you are interested in some form of a BI consultation, please do reach out to us. My email address is here on the screen, as is my cell phone number available for you to talk to. And certainly any questions that you have, we can help to answer, or just take a pic of the QR code you see displayed there. It'll take you directly to our landing page, and you can schedule an appointment through that particular vehicle. So thank you again for having us. We're certainly very appreciative of the opportunity to chat with you and impart some of this information. Neil, over to you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Very, very informative and interesting. And I failed to mention early on that MyBar is a leading software implementation and consulting firm that is based in New York City and servicing the United States with a number of solutions, including Microsoft, but also NetSuite and Acumatica and others. So thank you for coming on today. I want to tell you a little bit about the Controllers Council. In case you don't know, we're a national community of accounting and corporate finance professionals. And we have peer interaction, we have CPE, career services, and others. Here's some key links to our website. Maybe missing the bottom of that, Jory, if you could push it down a little bit. So our main website. I also wanted to tell you, we're still on that last slide, please, previous slide. Also wanted to tell you about a special membership promotion that we're running with today's webcast. You can see the link there for BI. So please use that for 20% off, BI20 code for 20% off membership. So let's go to that next slide then, please, Jory. So here's some save the dates. We announced the Controller of the Year awards. The registration is free for this program. So please nominate yourself or one of your peers. We have some upcoming webcasts, including cybersecurity a week from today. Webcast briefing from a world-renowned expert on cybersecurity. And then travel and expense management automation on March 18th, and others coming shortly thereafter. I did want to share with you that this webcast and other webcasts are all available in our video archive. So you can go to our events page down past upcoming webcasts, and there'll be a video archive where you can view all prior webcasts. And then just a piece of housekeeping as well. There'll be all attendees will receive an email in approximately 24 hours with a link to this webcast where you'll be able to, I know someone asked a question whether the webcast will be available, and the answer is yes. And that will be emailed to your attention in the next 24 hours. So thank you again. Go ahead, Jory, to the next slide. Thank you again to MyBar and to Amir for all his insight, and for Kayco and all the great things that they do. And Derek and Jory, thank you for your great information today. And I want to wish everyone that's on the webcast today the greatest success in 2021, and look forward to collaboration in the future. So thanks and have a great day.
Thank you so much.